Imagine, what would be the perfect time to have a child? It's a question many of us grapple with, isn't it? Society has its own timelines, its own expectations. In India, for instance, there's a general concept, a kind of societal script, if you will. First, you're expected to settle down, ideally by the age of 28 to 30, maybe even 32. Then comes marriage, followed by a few years of marital bliss. You enjoy journeys together, create memories, explore new places, and simply revel in each other's company. This phase usually lasts around 3 years, and finally, after all these life experiences, you're expected to welcome your first child into the world, typically around the age of 32 to 35. This timeline, etched in the minds of many, seems to be the norm, doesn't it? But let's delve a bit deeper. Let's examine this timeline from a biological perspective. It's a known fact that marriage under 25 poses no significant reproductive issues. Both men and women can reproduce without any significant difficulties up to the age of 35. But post that, if a healthy lifestyle isn't maintained, fertility issues might emerge. In the current scenario, for families from a middle-class background, the trouble doesn't usually arise with the first child. The real challenge begins when the thought of a second child comes into play. Why, you ask? Well, if you're hoping for a 3 to 5 year gap between your two children, then for your second child, you're likely to be in the age bracket of 35 to 40. In this modern age, fertility issues are more common post-35. So if you're planning for a second child, it might take a bit more time, maybe a year or two, or maybe more. This delay not only costs more money, but also leads to physical and mental stress. So does this timeline pose any problem? It seems like an intricate dance, doesn't it? Balancing societal norms, biological clocks, and your own personal desires. But in the end, the decision is yours, based on your health, your life, and your aspirations. The key is to strike a balance that works for you. When it comes to biology, the clock ticks differently. Indeed, as we delve into the world of biology, we find that our bodies operate on a different timeline, especially when it comes to reproduction. Fertility, for both men and women, is not an infinite resource. In fact, it follows a somewhat predictable pattern, with peak fertility occurring in our 20s and gradually declining after that. The magic number, as it were, seems to be 35. Up until this age, most individuals can reproduce without any significant problems. However, once you cross the threshold of 35, things can become more complicated. There's a higher chance of encountering fertility problems, and this is true for both men and women. This doesn't mean that having a child after 35 is impossible, far from it, but it does mean that the process can become more challenging. This is particularly pertinent in our modern times, where infertility is on the rise. Lifestyle factors, environmental changes, stress, all contribute to this trend. And while medical advancements have made it possible for many to become parents later in life, the fact remains that our biological clock doesn't stop ticking. Now let's consider a common scenario. You decide to have your first child around the age of 32 to 35. The process goes smoothly and you have a healthy child. However, if you're thinking about a second child, and you're part of the majority who prefer a gap of 3 to 5 years between children, then you're looking at being in the age bracket of 35 to 40 for your second child. Now, remember that number we mentioned earlier? 35. This is where things can become more complex. The risk of fertility problems increases, and it's not uncommon for it to take longer to conceive the second time around. This can lead to increased physical and emotional stress, not to mention the potential financial implications of fertility treatments. When it comes to having a child, biology doesn't wait for your plans. So, while it's important to plan, it's equally important to be aware of the biological implications. After all, understanding our biology can help us make informed decisions about when to start our families. Now let's shift our focus to the financial side of the coin. When considering the perfect time to have a child, it's essential not to overlook the economic aspects. Particularly for middle-class families, the financial implications of having a child at an older age can be a significant burden. Let's take a moment to think about the costs associated with infertility treatments. After the age of 35, the chances of facing fertility issues increase. These treatments don't come cheap. They can easily run into thousands of dollars, putting a dent in your savings. And let's not forget, it might take more than one attempt, adding to the financial strain. Then, there's the cost of raising a child. It's no secret that bringing up a child can be expensive. From healthcare to education, the costs can quickly add up. Now imagine supporting these expenses when you're in your 60s. It's during this time when most people are planning for retirement, not for financing a child's university education. Moreover, if you're considering having a second child with a gap of 3 to 5 years, you're looking at supporting your children's education and career development well into your 60s or even 70s. For many, this can be a daunting prospect, but it's not just about the money. There's also the emotional toll to consider. The stress of financial pressure can affect your health and well-being. It can strain relationships and lead to a less than ideal environment for bringing up a child. Remember, planning for a child isn't just about deciding the perfect age. It's about considering all the factors that come into play, including your financial readiness. It's about taking a realistic look at your circumstances and making a decision that's right for you and your family. The financial reality of having a child later in life can be quite challenging. It's a reality that needs careful consideration. After all, the goal is not just to have a child, but to provide them with a nurturing environment where they can thrive. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. We've journeyed through the biological and financial implications of having a child, especially the second one, in the later stages of life. It's clear that biology doesn't wait on our schedule. After the age of 35, fertility can become a challenge, potentially leading to emotional and financial stress. On the financial side, supporting a child, particularly through their education and early career, can stretch well into our retirement years. This can pose significant challenges, especially for middle and lower income families. The message here isn't to discourage family planning, but to encourage a balanced and practical approach. Consider your health, lifestyle, financial situation, and the potential impacts on your future children. It's about thinking ahead, but not so far that you overlook the realities of the present. In the end, it's all about making informed decisions that work best for you and your family.